The universe was never prepared for the shock that came with the arrival of the Zorathians. This alien empire, long known for its strength, had always been a dark shadow in the galaxy. But now, they were not only feared because of their vast territory, but also for their newly revealed weapon, the Zorathian energy cannon. These weapons were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Massive, terrifying, and powerful, they had the ability to destroy entire fleets with a single shot. In just moments, these cannons could turn 100 ships into nothing more than vapor. For the first time in galactic history, the balance of power was about to shift in favor of a race that was nearly unstoppable. It began with a simple demonstration. In a dark corner of space, an uninhabited system was targeted. The Zorathian flagship, a colossal ship unlike anything humanity had ever imagined, fired its weapon. A flash of intense light, then silence. In less than a second, an entire fleet of alien warships was reduced to ashes, not even a trace of debris left behind. What made this even more terrifying was the fact that this was just one of their many weapons. The Zorathians had the power to wipe out entire species, entire civilizations, without even breaking a sweat. As the Zorathians traveled from system to system, they left a trail of destruction in their wake. Whole planets were eradicated. Entire species vanished, leaving only dust behind. Their weapons were so powerful that no one dared stand in their way. The Galactic Council, an alliance of powerful alien species who had long been the authority of the galaxy, watched with awe and fear. For the first time, they were unsure whether their technology and alliances could stop the Zorathians. And in the midst of all this, there was Earth, small, insignificant, and vulnerable. Humanity was still developing its technology, with warships and defenses that were decades behind the advanced alien empires. Earth's people had never experienced a threat like this. In fact, most of the galaxy had assumed Earth was nothing more than a backwater planet, one that would never pose any serious challenge to the larger, more powerful races. The Galactic Council, made up of species far older and more advanced than humanity, couldn't help but laugh. They thought Earth was just a footnote in the story of the galaxy. They watched with a certain smug satisfaction, believing that humanity would be wiped out in a matter of days. After all, how could a primitive species like humans stand against the full might of the Zorathian Empire? But the humans were silent. They didn't make threats. They didn't broadcast their fear. They didn't try to negotiate with the Zorathians or beg for mercy. Instead, they waited. They knew that humanity had always been underestimated, and perhaps that was their greatest strength. People didn't give up easily. They fought for survival, for family, for the future. Earth was their home, and they would defend it. No matter the odds. The first signs of the Zorathians' advance came quickly. A human colony on the edge of Earth's territories, peaceful and serene, suddenly found itself under attack. The colony had never seen anything like it. The Zorathian fleet appeared out of nowhere, their ships dropping from stealth faster than any human ship could react. In a matter of minutes, the Zorathian fleet opened fire with their energy cannons. The attack was swift, merciless, and devastating. The colony that had once been a thriving community was reduced to rubble. Buildings, streets, and homes were torn apart. In the blink of an eye, millions of innocent lives were erased. It wasn't just an attack, it was an annihilation. From the depths of space, the Zorathian commander, an alien known as Warlord Zorak, watched the destruction unfold on his screen. He gave no orders for mercy, only satisfaction. The humans had been wiped out. The Zorathians didn't care about the politics of the Galactic Council or the cries of the humans. They simply wanted to dominate. Earth, with all its resources and potential, was now on their list. But just when it seemed like all hope was lost, an unexpected message came through the darkness of space. It wasn't a cry for help, nor was it a message of surrender. It wasn't even a demand for peace. No, it was a statement, a challenge. We may not have your weapons, but we have something you can't fathom, our will to survive. Those words sent shockwaves across the galaxy. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a boast. It was something deeper, something more primal. Humanity's message wasn't about the weapons they lacked or the technology they didn't possess. It was about something far stronger, something that the Zorathians could never have prepared for. Humanity's strength wasn't in their guns or ships, it was in their hearts. The message was clear: no matter how many weapons the Zorathians had, they had underestimated humanity's will to fight and survive. The Zorathian fleet, which had expected to crush Earth's defenses with ease, suddenly found itself facing an unexpected challenge. The galaxy, which had once looked upon humanity as weak and insignificant, now watched with intense curiosity. The humans had made their move, and no one knew what would happen next. Would they survive the overwhelming power of the Zorathians, or would they be wiped out like so many other species before them? The stage was set. The galaxy was holding its breath, waiting to see if Earth could turn the tide and show the universe that even the most technologically advanced aliens could be defeated. And the most intriguing question of all was, how would humanity fight back? The message sent by Earth's warship wasn't just a declaration of survival, it was a rallying cry. A warning to the Zorathians that humanity wasn't just going to roll over and die. No, they were going to stand their ground and show the universe that the humans were not to be underestimated. The clock was ticking. The Zorathian fleet, looming larger with every passing moment, began its slow approach toward Earth. The weapons were ready, the cannons primed for destruction. But Earth's response wasn't going to be one of fear. It would be one of defiance. And in that defiance, humanity would discover its greatest strength. The world would watch, the universe would listen, and the Zorathians would soon learn just how wrong they were about Earth. As the Zorathian ships began their descent toward Earth, the galaxy was gripped with anticipation. The tension was palpable. Would humanity's will to survive be enough to turn the tide? Or would they fall to the overwhelming might of the Zorathian Empire? Only time would tell. The fate of Earth, and perhaps the entire galaxy, was about to be decided. Captain Ethan Blake stood in the dimly lit command center of the human warship Sentinel. His face was hard, marked by years of battle and loss. A seasoned war veteran, Blake had led his crew through countless skirmishes across distant worlds. But this was different. This wasn't just another mission. It was the fight for humanity's very survival. His eyes were fixed on the viewscreen in front of him, where the massive Zorathian fleet loomed, ready to strike. Blake wasn't just another leader. He was a symbol of humanity's resilience, someone who had been through hell and back. The decision to fight, to stand tall against the overwhelming odds, wasn't just about protecting Earth. It was personal. As the screen flickered, images of his past flashed through his mind, his family, the ones he had lost in a brutal war years ago. They had been killed in a raid, a senseless act of violence by an enemy that saw them as nothing more than targets. Blake had always felt the loss deeply, but it was that very pain that had turned him into the leader he was today. He had learned to carry that grief like armor, and now, it fueled his unshakable resolve to protect the future of humanity. Captain Blake's mind raced as he stared at the holographic map of the galaxy. The Zorathians were unstoppable, their energy weapons far beyond anything Earth had ever seen. It seemed like an impossible task, but Blake refused to believe that Earth had no hope. He had seen the strength of his people before. Humans had survived against all odds, and they would do it again. Blake wasn't ready to give up. Not now. Not ever. Captain, a voice broke through his thoughts. It was Bonner, one of his most trusted soldiers and a genius mechanic. He had worked on everything from warships to weapons systems, always tinkering with new ideas. Bonner was the kind of person who could think his way out of any problem. Blake turned to face him. "We've got a problem," Bonner continued, his tone urgent. "The Zorathians, they've got a fleet of cloaked warships. They're using a stealth technology so advanced, it makes their ships almost invisible. We can't track them with our current systems. Blake's heart sank. The Zorathians' cloaking technology would give them the upper hand, making it nearly impossible for humanity to strike first. If they couldn't even see the enemy, how could they fight back? Blake's mind worked quickly, analyzing the situation. They were outgunned, outmatched, and now, they were facing a fleet that could appear anywhere, at any time. Do we have a way to track them? Blake asked, his voice calm but filled with the weight of responsibility. Bonner hesitated for a moment before replying. We might be able to reverse engineer some of the alien tech. Serena's been working on it. If we can understand how their cloaking system works, we might be able to develop a countermeasure. Serena. Blake's mind turned to her. Serena was an expert strategist, and more importantly, she was brilliant when it came to cracking alien technology. She had already made strides in analyzing some of the Zorathian weapons, but this cloaking technology was another beast entirely. If anyone could figure it out, it was her. Get her to the lab, Blake ordered. We need results, and we need them fast. Bonner nodded and immediately went off to find Serena. As Blake watched him leave, he allowed himself a moment of doubt. Was this enough? Was their small crew of elite soldiers really capable of turning the tide against the Zorathians? He had no answers, but one thing was certain, they couldn't back down. Humanity had never given up on a fight before, and they wouldn't start now. In the lab, Serena was hunched over a terminal, surrounded by piles of data and alien tech. Her sharp eyes flicked across the screens as she ran simulations, her fingers flying over the holographic interface. She had been working around the clock, trying to unlock the secrets of the Zorathian cloaking devices, but the closer she got, the more complicated it became. Serena, how's it going? Blake's voice came through the comms. She glanced up, her tired face illuminated by the glow of the terminal. I'm close, Captain. The Zorathian cloaks are powered by a highly advanced energy field that disrupts our sensors. I'm trying to isolate the frequency they're using. If I can mimic it, we might be able to see through their cloaking. Blake knew time was running out. The Zorathians were getting closer to Earth, and if they didn't act soon, it could be too late. He paced the command center, mentally running through their options. He had seen the horror of alien invasions before, he had fought in wars where humanity was on the brink of extinction. But he had always found a way to survive. And now, he would do it again. He wasn't going to let the Zorathians erase Earth from the map. Just keep me posted, Blake said, his voice firm. We don't have much time. Meanwhile, back on the Sentinel, Bonner had gathered the rest of the crew. Among them was his right-hand man, Jax, a young and talented soldier who had been with Blake since the early days of the war. Jax was quick-witted and agile, always finding a way to get out of a tight spot. But today, his usual optimism was replaced by a sense of grim determination. They all knew what was at stake. We're going to need a solid plan, Blake said, turning to his crew. The Zorathians are too powerful. We're going to have to use our strengths to outsmart them. We've got the will to survive, but we need to think fast. Bonner spoke up. We've got the tech, but we need to get close enough to use it. We'll need to board their ships and disable their cloaking devices from the inside. Jax nodded, his eyes narrowing. And we'll need to hit them fast. We don't have the firepower to go toe-to-toe with their fleet, but we can take them by surprise. Strike first, strike hard. Serena's voice crackled through the comms again. I've got it. I've isolated the frequency. It's unstable, but if we can synchronize our ship sensors to it, we'll be able to track the Zorathians' cloaked ships. Blake's heart surged with hope. This was it. They had a chance. They weren't going to let Earth fall without a fight. Good work, Serena, Blake said. Bonner, get the crew ready. We're going to need every hand on deck. We're not just going to survive this, we're going to make sure the Zorathians know that they messed with the wrong species. The crew rallied together, each soldier preparing for what was to come. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and facing an enemy with technology beyond their wildest dreams. But Blake knew one thing: humanity had something the Zorathians didn't: the will to fight, to survive, and to protect everything they held dear. The countdown to the final battle had begun, and the fate of humanity rested in their hands. The Zorathians had underestimated them once. Now, it was time for them to learn that humanity's greatest strength was its unyielding determination. The air in the command center was thick with tension as Captain Ethan Blake addressed his team. Time was running out, and the Zorathians were closing in on Earth. Their cloaking technology was the key to winning the war, and Blake had made the bold decision to strike first. They had to take out a Zorathian supply base, the heart of their operation, in order to disable the cloaking tech once and for all. But the mission was dangerous, far more dangerous than anything they had ever faced. Blake stood at the center of the room, his eyes scanning his crew. Each one was focused, their faces set in determination. Serena, Bonner, Jax, and the others knew the risks. They all knew this wasn't just another mission. This was a desperate attempt to turn the tide in humanity's favor. "We're not just hitting a supply base," Blake said, his voice low and serious. "We're hitting their command center. If we succeed, we'll have a chance to finally take away their advantage. If we fail, this could be the end." The silence that followed was heavy, but it was broken by Bonner's voice. "I've got the stealth ship prepped, Captain. It's a tight fit, but it'll get us in without being detected. The new cloaking tech we're using should help us avoid their scanners. But once we're in, it's going to be all on us." Blake nodded. "We've trained for this. We've prepared. This is our chance to strike first and show them we're not just some weak species to be wiped out." As they moved to the hangar bay, Blake couldn't help but feel the weight of what they were about to do. The stealth ship, Phantom, was small, barely large enough to fit their crew. But its advanced cloaking systems made it nearly invisible to the Zorathians' detection systems. It was humanity's best shot at sneaking into the heart of enemy territory without being detected. But the mission was far from guaranteed. Every part of this plan was high risk, and one mistake could mean the end of them all. Bonner, ever the comm engineer, made his final checks on the ship, while Serena went over the tactical plans. Jax and the others loaded up with high-tech weapons, prepared for anything. Blake could see the resolve in their eyes. They weren't scared, they were determined. If they were going to go down, they were going to make sure the Zorathians remembered who had dared to fight back. The Phantom lifted off from the hangar bay, moving silently through the vastness of space. The crew sat in tense silence as the ship made its way toward the Zorathian base. Outside the ship, the stars were just distant pinpricks of light in the blackness, offering no hint of the danger that lay ahead. Inside, however, every moment was filled with anticipation and dread. As they neared the base, the crew felt the tension rise. The supply base was heavily guarded, surrounded by fleets of Zorathian warships. Blake knew they couldn't afford to be seen. A single alert from the enemy could mean disaster. The Phantom glided past the fleet, moving with the grace of a ghost, its cloaking tech keeping it out of sight. Almost there, Blake muttered, his eyes locked on the monitor. "Everyone stay sharp. One slip up, and it's over." Minutes stretched into hours as they approached the base. When they finally arrived, the Phantom came to a stop above a massive, heavily fortified structure. Blake looked at his crew. This was it. They had to disable the Zorathian cloaking tech. This was their only chance to gain the upper hand. "We're going in," Blake said, his voice steady, despite the chaos swirling in his mind. "Bonner, you're on the controls. Serena, you're with me. The rest of you, stay sharp." The crew moved quickly, sliding into position as the doors of the Phantom opened, revealing the interior of the Zorathian supply base. The team moved swiftly, using their advanced gear to bypass security systems and make their way deep into the heart of the base. Every step was filled with peril, but they moved with precision, their years of training allowing them to stay one step ahead of the enemy. Then, the first signs of trouble appeared. As they entered a narrow hallway, Zorathian soldiers suddenly emerged from a side door, weapons drawn. Blake's heart raced as he drew his own sidearm, the high-tech weapon charging with energy. Without hesitation, he fired, his shots hitting the first soldier square in the chest. The Zorathian dropped to the ground, but more were coming. The team fought back fiercely, using their superior tactics and quick thinking to overwhelm the Zorathians in the cramped corridors. Blake led the charge, his soldiers moving with brutal efficiency as they eliminated enemy forces one by one. It was a vicious, brutal fight, no time for hesitation, no room for fear. The Zorathians fought with ferocity, but Blake and his crew fought with everything they had. This wasn't just about survival, it was about ensuring that humanity had a future. Blake's heart raced as he pushed forward, taking down another soldier as Jax cleared a path ahead. They were almost there, just a few more corridors, and they would reach the heart of the base. But as they rounded the corner, they were met with a terrifying surprise. A massive Zorathian warlord appeared before them, armed with an energy sword that crackled with deadly power. He was towering, easily twice the size of a human, and his armor gleamed with a cold, terrifying light. Without warning, he charged at Blake, swinging his sword with deadly intent. Blake barely had time to react, ducking just as the sword swiped through the air above him. The fight was brutal. Blake's team moved in to assist, but the Zorathian warlord was a force to be reckoned with. He was fast, strong, and relentless. In the chaos of the battle, Blake could see Bonner's face, he was struggling to keep up, his arm injured from the earlier fighting. Blake's thoughts raced. They couldn't afford to lose anyone, not now, not with so much at stake. With one final, coordinated strike, Blake and his team managed to bring down the warlord. But the victory came at a heavy cost. Bonner had taken a fatal blow during the fight. His body crumpled to the ground, his lifeless eyes staring up at the ceiling. Blake's heart clenched as he knelt beside his fallen comrade, the weight of the loss crashing down on him. "Bonner," Serena whispered, her voice choked with grief. She reached out, touching his hand. "No. We were so close." Blake stood, his face a mask of grief and determination. Bonner had been more than just a mechanic, he had been family. The loss was unbearable, but Blake knew they couldn't stop now. They had a mission to complete, and they would honor Bonner's sacrifice. With their hearts heavy, Blake's team continued forward, managing to disable the cloaking technology in completing their mission. But as they made their way back to the Phantom, they learned the horrifying truth: the Zorathians had known they were there all along. The fleet ambushed them as they tried to escape, their stealth ship barely managing to evade the overwhelming assault. The battle was fierce, and Blake knew they had just survived the first of many battles to come. They had dealt a blow to the Zorathians, but the fight was far from over. Bonner's sacrifice was not in vain. It had fueled their determination to keep fighting, to keep pushing forward no matter the cost. The Zorathians had made a mistake. They had underestimated humanity's will to survive. And now, they would feel the full force of humanity's wrath. The universe had never seen a more desperate moment for humanity. After weeks of hiding in the shadows, humanity finally had its chance to strike. The Zorathian fleet, with its fearsome cloaking technology, had long been an insurmountable obstacle. But now, after the daring mission led by Captain Ethan Blake and his team, the cloak was gone. The Zorathians no longer had their advantage of invisibility, and the Earth's fleet could track their movements. It was humanity's one shot to turn the tide of the war. Blake stood before his forces, the atmosphere thick with anticipation. The last few months had been brutal, full of losses and sacrifices. He could feel the weight of every life lost. Bonner's death was still fresh in his mind, and Serena's solemn expression haunted him as the mission ahead loomed large. But this was the moment they had been waiting for. "We've taken down their cloak, now we finish what we started," Blake's voice was firm, rallying his troops. "We've been underestimated, ignored, and attacked. But we're still standing, and that's going to be our advantage today." His words echoed in the command center, sparking a wave of determination in every soldier present. They had nothing left to lose, and they weren't going to let the Zorathians erase them from the stars. Blake knew this was it. A single strike, and the balance of the war could shift. Humanity's fleet, a ragtag group of warships cobbled together from scraps and sheer willpower, moved into position. The flagship, a massive Zorathian warship, loomed in the distance, its dark hull shining in the light of distant stars. It was the heart of the Zorathian war effort, and taking it down would deliver a devastating blow to their entire fleet. But it wouldn't be easy. The Zorathians would never go down without a fight. Blake watched the fleet's progress on the monitor. His heart pounded in his chest. The odds were stacked against them. The human ships were outgunned, outnumbered, and outmatched in technology. But there was one thing the Zorathians didn't understand about humanity: unpredictability. The humans had no illusions about their technological inferiority, but their resourcefulness, their cunning, and their willingness to fight tooth and nail made them a dangerous enemy. As the Earth fleet neared the Zorathian flagship, Blake's ship, Aegis, moved to the front. It was heavily damaged from previous skirmishes but still operational. Blake had seen worse, and the crew was more than ready for what lay ahead. They had a mission to complete. The Zorathian flagship opened fire first, its massive energy cannons unleashing a barrage of blasts that tore through space. Human ships dodged and weaved, narrowly avoiding the destructive energy waves. The air in the command center grew tense as the humans fired back with makeshift weapons, their shots barely making a dent in the advanced armor of the Zorathian ships. But they kept going, determined to keep the fight alive. They couldn't afford to back down now. Blake gritted his teeth as his ship took another hit, the hull rattling from the impact. "Return fire. Don't let up," he ordered, his voice sharp with authority. The crew obeyed, launching a volley of missiles, laser blasts, and anything they could throw at the enemy. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep the Zorathians on their toes. They had to fight differently, strategically, unpredictably, so the Zorathians wouldn't know what to expect. The battle was a blur of flashing lights and explosions. Blake's heart raced as he watched the chaos unfold. They were doing it, they were holding their ground. But as the battle raged on, Blake knew they couldn't rely on sheer willpower forever. They needed to hit the heart of the enemy's fleet, the flagship, and take it down. The moment of truth came when Blake's ship, Aegis, managed to slip past the enemy defenses and into the heart of the Zorathian flagship. The massive warship was alive with activity, its corridors filled with Zorathian soldiers, robotic guards, and alien technology. Blake's team had trained for this moment. They knew the risks, and they knew what had to be done. Blake, leading the charge, took point as they infiltrated the flagship. The Zorathian soldiers were fierce, but the humans were faster, more determined. They fought their way through the narrow hallways, their weapons blazing as they tore through enemy forces. Blake's mind was sharp, focused only on the task at hand. He could feel the pressure building, but there was no turning back now. They reached the heart of the flagship, where the Zorathian leader, Warlord Zorak, awaited them. The final showdown was at hand. Zorak stood tall, a terrifying figure clad in advanced alien armor. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light as he raised his massive energy blade, ready to strike. Blake's pulse quickened. He knew this fight would be unlike any other. Zorak was stronger, faster, and technologically superior in every way. But Blake wasn't here to win with power or technology. He was here to win with human ingenuity. The battle between Blake and Zorak was brutal. The Zorathian warlord was a beast, his every move deadly and precise. He swung his energy blade with lethal intent, the blade crackling with power. Blake barely dodged, narrowly avoiding a fatal strike. With every move, Zorak seemed to anticipate his next action, countering each of Blake's blows with terrifying accuracy. But Blake wasn't about to give up. He had faced worse odds before, and he wasn't going to lose now. With every strike, he relied on his instincts, his knowledge of human tactics, and his unshakable will to survive. Slowly, Blake began to turn the tide. Zorak's movements became slower, his strikes less precise as Blake exploited the weaknesses in his opponent's armor. The final blow came when Blake, using every ounce of strength and cunning, disarmed Zorak. The Zorathian warlord fell to the ground, his massive frame crumpling in defeat. Blake stood over him, breathless but victorious. The flagship's control center was in disarray, and the human crew had delivered a devastating blow. But the victory came at a heavy cost. Serena, who had been by Blake's side throughout the mission, had made the ultimate sacrifice. She had volunteered to disable the flagship's main reactor, knowing that it would guarantee their success but also knowing it would cost her life. As Blake and the team made their way to the escape pods, they heard the explosion that marked her sacrifice. Serena's death left a void in Blake's heart. She had been more than a comrade, she had become a friend, someone he had trusted with his life. Her loss was felt deeply, but it only fueled his resolve to finish what they had started. Humanity was now in the fight of its life, but with the Zorathian flagship destroyed and their forces crippled, Blake knew that this was just the beginning. The war was far from over, but humanity had taken its first major step in striking back. The Zorathians had underestimated humanity's will to survive, and now they would know what it meant to face a species that would never back down. Blake and his team had given everything they had, and they wouldn't stop until they had won the war. The war had dragged on for far too long, but humanity had reached its final test. The destruction of the Zorathian flagship had sent shockwaves through their forces, leaving the once mighty empire in chaos. But there was still one weapon that could end everything, the Doomsday Device, a terrifying creation capable of erasing entire planets. Earth's fate now rested on Blake and his team, the last remaining humans capable of stopping the device before it could destroy their home and the galaxy. Blake felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. The stakes had never been higher. His crew, battered but unbroken, followed him with unwavering loyalty. They had lost so much, comrades, friends, and loved ones, but they still stood strong, ready to take the final step in their fight. The Zorathians had underestimated them from the very beginning, and now they would pay for it. As they approached the heart of the Zorathian Empire, the tension was palpable. The massive warships that had once dominated the skies now seemed like nothing more than fragile shells, their once imposing fleets now scattered and disorganized. But the Zorathians still had one last card to play, a weapon that could wipe out everything in its path. Blake's team had to reach it before it was too late. The journey to the Doomsday Device was anything but easy. The closer they got to the core of the Zorathian war machine, the fiercer the resistance became. Zorathian soldiers, enhanced by their advanced technology and brutal training, fought relentlessly to stop Blake's team. Their fierce determination was matched only by the humans' resolve. Every inch they gained was hard-won, each step forward a battle in itself. The visuals of the assault were breathtaking and intense. As they made their way toward the device, Blake and his crew were forced to endure orbital bombardments, intense firefights, and close-quarters combat. The sounds of explosions filled the air as debris rained down from above, while the hum of energy weapons and the screams of soldiers echoed through the battlefield. Each moment felt like it could be their last, but there was no turning back now. Blake could see the desperation in his team's eyes, but also the determination. They had come too far to fail now. The Zorathians may have had the technology, but humanity had something far more powerful, an unyielding will to survive. And that was something no amount of technology could defeat. As they finally breached the heart of the Zorathian stronghold, the sight before them was nothing short of overwhelming. The Doomsday Device stood in the center of a vast chamber, pulsating with deadly energy. It was massive, its cold, metallic surface gleaming ominously under the dim lights. The device looked almost alive, as if it was ready to unleash its destructive power at any moment. Blake's heart raced as he took in the sight. They had to stop it, no matter the cost. But before they could make their move, they were confronted by the one enemy who had haunted them throughout this war, Warlord Zorak. The Zorathian leader stood at the center of the chamber, flanked by his elite guards. His eyes glowed with a cold, ruthless light as he saw Blake and his team approach. The final showdown had arrived. Zorak's voice echoed through the chamber, filled with both fury and arrogance. "You think you can stop me? You think you can stop this weapon?" He laughed, his voice dripping with disdain. "You are nothing compared to the might of the Zorathian Empire." Blake stepped forward, his face set in determination. He had heard Zorak's taunts before, but this time, it would be different. The stakes were higher, and this time, the humans would be the ones to determine the outcome. The Zorathians had brought destruction to Earth, but it was the humans who would deliver the final blow. The battle between Blake and Zorak was fierce. Zorak's strength was unmatched, his technological enhancements making him a formidable opponent. His massive energy blade crackled with power as he swung it at Blake, aiming for a fatal strike. But Blake was quicker, his human instincts guiding him as he narrowly dodged the blade's deadly arc. His own weapon, a combination of Earth's advanced technology and his own ingenuity, clashed with Zorak's in a stunning display of sparks and power. Every strike Blake made was calculated, each move aimed at exploiting Zorak's weaknesses. Zorak's blows were powerful, but they lacked the precision and adaptability of Blake's attacks. The Zorathian warlord relied too heavily on his enhancements, while Blake used everything at his disposal, his raw power, his intelligence, and his unbreakable will. With each passing moment, Blake could feel the tide turning. The fight was no longer about strength alone, it was about resilience. Zorak's overconfidence was his downfall. Blake used it against him, outmaneuvering the Zorathian leader and landing critical blows that weakened him. The battle raged on, both warriors pushing their limits in a final, desperate struggle. But just as Blake thought victory was within reach, Zorak's voice rang out with a final, defiant command. "You may have defeated me, but you cannot stop the weapon." His fingers hovered over the activation panel, ready to destroy Earth in a single, catastrophic blast. Blake's heart raced as he saw Zorak's hand inch closer to the button that would unleash the doomsday device. This was it, the final moment that would decide humanity's fate. In one last desperate move, Blake charged forward, using the last of his strength to reach Zorak. With a swift, powerful strike, Blake disabled Zorak's arm, sending the warlord crashing to the ground. But the danger wasn't over. The doomsday device was still primed for activation, and time was running out. Blake knew that without disabling it, Earth would be doomed. He had one chance to stop it. With every ounce of his remaining strength, Blake sprinted toward the device. His mind raced as he assessed the controls. The panel was complex, filled with layers of alien technology, but Blake had learned enough over the course of the war. He quickly manipulated the controls, using everything he had learned about the Zorathian tech to shut down the weapon. The device's pulsing energy slowed, flickering as Blake made the final adjustments. Just as the countdown reached its final seconds, Blake's hand slammed down on the last control, deactivating the doomsday device. The chamber shook as the device powered down, its deadly hum silenced forever. Earth had been saved. Blake stood there, breathless, covered in sweat and blood. The fight was over, but the cost had been high. The war had taken everything from him, friends, comrades, and countless lives. But in the end, humanity had prevailed. They had faced the overwhelming power of the Zorathian Empire, and they had won. They had saved their home, their galaxy, and their future. As Blake looked at the defeated warlord and the silent doomsday device, he knew that this was the end of one war, but the beginning of a new era for humanity. They had proven that even in the face of certain destruction, they could rise above it. The fight had been long and brutal, but in the end, humanity had triumphed. And with that victory, Blake understood the true power of the human spirit. It was a power that no alien race, no matter how advanced, could ever crush. It was a power that would continue to drive humanity forward, no matter the odds. The war was over, but the story of humanity's resilience had only just begun. The war that had once seemed like an endless nightmare was finally over. The Zorathian forces, once so powerful, lay defeated and broken. Their weapons destroyed, their fleets scattered, and their once unyielding empire reduced to rubble. Humanity, against all odds, had emerged victorious. Blake and his team, battered and scarred, stood as symbols of their species' incredible strength and resilience. They had proven that no matter how powerful their enemies, humanity's will to survive could never be crushed. The battle had been long, the cost high. They had lost so many along the way, comrades who had given everything to protect their home. But in the end, their sacrifices had not been in vain. Earth was safe, the Zorathians were defeated, and the galaxy had witnessed humanity's incredible will to fight against impossible odds. For Blake, the journey had been one of personal growth, a realization that strength came not only from advanced technology or weapons but from something deeper, the unyielding spirit of the human heart. As the dust settled and the warships began to return home, Blake stood at the front of the command center, his mind racing through the events that had led them here. The horrors of battle, the pain of loss, and the victories they had celebrated, all of it felt like a lifetime ago. Yet here they were, standing together, having defied the odds and emerged victorious. The Earth that they had fought so hard to protect was now safe, but Blake knew that their journey was far from over. He looked out over the survivors, his team, and the people of Earth. The faces of those who had fought beside him reflected the same mixture of exhaustion and determination. There were no words that could truly express what they had all been through. The losses they had suffered, the lives that had been sacrificed, were never far from their minds. But now was the time for them to honor those who had given their lives, to remind themselves and the world of the incredible cost of victory. Blake stepped forward, his voice steady as he addressed the crowd, the survivors, and the people of Earth who had been waiting for news of the war's outcome. Today, we stand here not just as soldiers, but as survivors, as human beings who have defied the impossible, he began, his words carrying through the silent room. We've lost so much, but we've gained something even more precious. We've gained the knowledge that we are not alone in this universe. And we've gained the knowledge that no matter how dark the future may seem, we are capable of facing it head-on. We will rebuild, we will heal, and we will grow stronger than ever before. His words were met with a soft murmur of approval, but it was the quiet nods and the looks of understanding from those who had fought beside him that told the true story. The humans, in all their flaws and imperfections, had proven that they could stand tall in the face of overwhelming destruction. Their will, their spirit, had been the key to their victory. And as Blake spoke, he knew that this moment of reflection was not just for the survivors but for those who would never come home, for those who had made the ultimate sacrifice. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. We honor those who gave their lives for our survival. They will never be forgotten. Their sacrifice will be the foundation upon which we build our future. The room fell silent as everyone paid their respects to the fallen. It was a moment of emotional closure for them all, a moment to grieve, but also to acknowledge the incredible strength it had taken to come this far. With the speech concluded, Blake and his team watched as the Earth began to rebuild. The once damaged cities began to come back to life. New infrastructure was being constructed, and people were once again walking the streets, breathing in the air of peace that had been so hard-won. But this peace, while hard-earned, was fragile. Blake knew that the galaxy was not a safe place, and they had seen enough to know that other dangers could be lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. Yet, despite the knowledge that future conflicts might be on the horizon, Blake and his team found hope in the aftermath of the war. Earth, once considered weak and insignificant, was now a recognized power in the galaxy. The Zorathian Empire was no more, and humanity had proven itself capable of facing the worst of threats. The lesson was clear: they might not have the most advanced technology, or the largest fleets, but humanity's greatest strength lay in its spirit, in its refusal to give up when the odds were stacked against them. Blake's gaze turned toward the stars, the endless expanse that stretched out before him. The galaxy was vast, and there was so much left to explore, so many mysteries to uncover. But Earth had found its place in it, and with that newfound position, Blake knew that humanity's future was secure. It was no longer a species on the edge of extinction, but one that could stand shoulder to shoulder with the most powerful civilizations in the universe. His team, though weary from the long battle, shared his sense of hope. They had all been through so much, and though they were forever changed by the war, they had emerged stronger for it. There would be scars, both physical and emotional, that would never fade, but they were survivors. And that was what mattered. The fight for Earth's survival had united them, and it would continue to drive them forward. As Blake stood there, looking at the horizon, he felt a deep sense of peace settle over him. The war was over, and humanity had won. But this victory was only the beginning. The future was uncertain, but humanity's place in it was no longer in question. They had earned their right to be here, and they would continue to fight for their future, no matter what challenges lay ahead. But just as Blake was about to turn away, a sudden feeling of unease washed over him. His eyes narrowed as he looked back toward the sky, scanning the vast expanse for anything unusual. The stars were silent, but there was a sense that something was watching. Something new. Something powerful. A strange fleet appeared on the horizon, its ships massive and gleaming, far more advanced than anything they had ever seen. The ships moved slowly, but with purpose, as though they were coming for Earth. Blake's heart raced as he realized what this meant. The galaxy had no shortage of enemies, and just as they had defeated one threat, another might already be on the way. But this time, humanity was ready. Blake turned to his team, their faces grim but resolute. They had just won the greatest battle of their lives, but the war was far from over. Humanity had proven its strength, and it was about to face something even more dangerous. But Blake knew one thing for sure: no matter what came next, humanity would not be shaken. They had already fought against the impossible, and they had won. The future was uncertain, but humanity would face it head-on, with the same determination and unbreakable spirit that had brought them this far. The screen faded to black, and the words appeared, "We will not be shaken." The story of humanity was far from over.